They say legends are born in gold, but sometimes the greatest treasures are struck in copper. Imagine this: a single Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin from the Denver Mint, dated 1951, slipping unnoticed through the hands of millions of Americans. A coin so ordinary, it was nearly invisible. Yet decades later, that same humble piece of copper would surface again, whispered about in collectors' circles, rumored to command a market value of over $822,000, a 1-cent coin. Worth nearly $1 million, but how? That's the question that has haunted numismatists for generations, a question that pulls us into one of the most fascinating corners of American coinage: history. The story begins in the aftermath of World War II. America was booming. Factories were roaring back to life, the population was surging, and coins were being minted at a breathtaking pace. In 1951 alone, over 625 million Lincoln 1-cent coins poured out of the Denver Mint. Each bore the iconic portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, his thoughtful gaze, his rugged jawline, and the faint impression of "In God We Trust." On the reverse, the familiar wheat stalks framed the words 1 cent, symbolizing growth, labor, and the promise of a thriving post-war America. To the average American, it was just another penny. But to the trained eye, the collector, the investor, the dreamer, not all copper is created equal. Now, here's where the mystery deepens. Among those hundreds of millions of coins, a handful, perhaps fewer than a dozen, emerged with anomalies so subtle they escaped notice for decades. Some bore minute doubling on the date. Others displayed misaligned dies, where the Denver D mint mark seemed to drift just a fraction out of place. A few were struck on foreign bronze planchets, blanks intended for coins of other nations that somehow found their way into the presses of the U.S. Mint. And in rare cases, the combination of these small errors produced coins that collectors today describe in reverent tones: the perfect storm of rarity, condition, and historical resonance. But rarity alone doesn't create value. There's something deeper, a psychology, an invisible current that moves through every collector's heart. Think about it. What drives someone to spend $800,000 on a 1-cent coin? It isn't just metal content. It isn't even just rarity. It's connection to a moment in American history, to a shared nostalgia for the world our grandparents lived in, to the idea that something ordinary can carry extraordinary meaning. The Lincoln 1-cent coin represents stability, humility, and endurance, qualities Americans admire, especially in uncertain times. And when a coin like the 1951 D era piece surfaces, it doesn't just attract buyers, it attracts believers. Let's talk about market psychology for a moment. In the world of numismatics, value is not static. It's emotional, cyclical, alive. When silver and gold prices rise, attention shifts toward precious metal coins. But when the economy trembles, collectors seek refuge in numismatic history, tangible artifacts that hold stories no inflation can erase. That's when copper coins, especially early Lincoln cents, begin to shine. In recent years, private auctions have seen jaw-dropping results for mid-century Lincoln 1-cent coins in pristine condition. Coins graded MS67 red or higher with flawless luster and sharp strikes have set records previously thought impossible. And then, out of nowhere, came whispers of a 1951 D Lincoln cent crossing the auction block for over $822,000. Was it a myth? A private sale? A one-of-a-kind error coin kept hidden for generations? The details are cloaked in mystery, but the impact was immediate. Collectors began scouring their old jars, inheritance boxes, and safe deposit holdings. Dealers reported surges of interest in early 1950s Denver issues. Online markets exploded with listings, each promising the next million-dollar penny. Here's the truth. Not every 1951 D is valuable. Most are worth face value, maybe a few cents if they're worn. But when you find one that tells a different story, the game changes. Imagine a coin struck with a slightly off-center die, enough to shift Lincoln's profile or distort the mint mark. Imagine one preserved untouched, its surface gleaming with the original mint red. sealed away in an old cigar box since the Eisenhower era. Now combine that rarity with a certified grade from a top-tier service, the kind of grade that makes seasoned investors pause mid-conversation. That's when you enter the realm of 5- and 6-figure valuations. And if that coin carries a documented minting anomaly, even better, a verified transitional plancher, you've crossed into numismatic legend. There's a certain poetry in all of this. Coins are storytellers made of metal. They travel through decades, through pockets, wars, and economies, absorbing the fingerprints of history. When you hold a coin from 1951, you're holding a moment when America was redefining itself, when cars had fins, televisions flickered in living rooms, and children could still buy candy for a single cent. It's easy to forget that every coin you touch has lived a life. Some were dropped in subway grates, some passed through the hands of soldiers or factory workers, and some, the lucky few, were tucked away, waiting for someone like you to recognize their hidden worth. But here's the twist most collectors overlook. Value isn't just in the coin, it's in timing. The coin market, like any market, breathes. It expands and contracts. Decades ago, few cared about Lincoln cents. Then came the boom of the 1980s, when the first great grading services emerged and transparency entered the market. Prices soared. Then they cooled. Then they soared again. Now, in our current era, with digital auctions, social media attention, and a renewed hunger for tangible wealth, the stage is set once more for extraordinary discoveries. A single high grade, error-verified 1951D could ignite headlines again, not just because of what it's worth, but because of what it represents, the American dream in miniature. The idea that something overlooked, forgotten, or dismissed could one day change a life. Let's pause for a question. When was the last time you checked your own coin jar? Inside, there might be a few Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coins from the 1940s, the 1950s, maybe one with a D mint mark beneath the date. You might think it's worth nothing, but remember, every million-dollar discovery started with someone who looked twice. Numismatics, at its core, isn't just about collecting metal, it's about preserving legacy. Each coin is a microcosm of its era, its design, its imperfections, its intent. When you study them long enough, you realize that the mint wasn't merely striking currency. It was striking identity. The Denver Mint, in particular, had a distinct character in the mid-20th century. It was efficient, bold, and known for experimenting with minting techniques to keep pace with rising demand. But speed has its price. Occasionally, dies would misalign, planchers would vary slightly in composition, and minute mechanical slips would create anomalies that, decades later, become objects of fascination and fortune. That's how the 1951D mystery was born, through a quiet, human imperfection that slipped past inspection, only to become a symbol of perfection in the eyes of collectors. The irony is that many of the world's most valuable coins were never intended to exist. A doubled die, an off-metal strike, a misplaced mint mark. Mistakes that once embarrassed the mint now fuel multi-million-dollar markets. There's something deeply human in that transformation. The idea that flaws can become masterpieces. That imperfection itself can become priceless. Perhaps that's why collectors often describe their passion not as a hobby, but as a calling. Because they're not just searching for coins. They're searching for meaning. So what should you do if you stumble across a 1951D Lincoln 1-cent coin? First, resist the temptation to clean it. A single touch of polish can erase thousands of dollars in potential value. Second, study it carefully under magnification. Look at the D mint mark. Is it misaligned? Is there doubling on the digits of the date? Is the color original? A bright, deep red that glows like a new penny under light? If you see any of these signs, it's time to submit the coin for professional grading. A slabbed, certified coin carries legitimacy. And in today's market, legitimacy is currency. Collectors pay for certainty. Investors pay for story. A graded, error-attributed 1951D has both. And yet, perhaps the most inspiring part of this story is not the money, but the metaphor. The 1951D Lincoln 1-cent coin reminds us that greatness often hides in plain sight. That in a world obsessed with instant success, quiet persistence, like copper enduring the test of time, still holds immense power. Every time a rare penny sells for hundreds of thousands of dollars, it sends a subtle message to anyone who listens. Value is not defined by appearance, but by history, authenticity, and discovery. There's an old saying among seasoned numismatists: you don't find the coin finds you. Maybe that's true. Maybe the coins we're meant to discover, the ones destined to change our lives, are already in our possession, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. So tonight, when the world grows quiet and the hum of daily life fades, take out that old coin jar. Turn the coins over in your hand. Look closer. You might just be holding a tiny piece of forgotten American history, a coin struck in 1951 in the heart of Denver, that carries the same promise it did the day it was minted, that even the smallest things can become monuments to legacy. And who knows? Maybe your next discovery won't just be worth a fortune. It might rewrite your own story. You're sorting through a small tin box of old coins, maybe something that once belonged to your grandfather. Among the dull copper tones, one piece catches your eye, a 1952 Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin, no mint mark beneath the date, ordinary at first glance. Yet this single coin, if it happens to be the right one, could be worth more than a house in the suburbs, over $800,000. Yes, you heard that right. A simple 1-cent piece from 1952, potentially valued at $817,000. And here's the haunting question that pulls every collector closer. What makes one coin, struck in the millions, suddenly become a national treasure while the rest remain pocket change? The 1952 Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin, struck in Philadelphia without a mint mark, seems deceptively simple. Coppery red, just over 3 grams in weight, and carrying that familiar image of Lincoln in quiet contemplation. But in the numismatic world, simplicity can be camouflage. Beneath that humble surface lies a series of mysteries, errors, die varieties, and minting quirks that can transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. Let's rewind history for a moment, back to the early 1950s. America was booming. The war was over. Optimism filled the air, and pennies clinked through soda fountains and jukeboxes. The U.S. Mint was producing billions of coins, churning out Lincoln cents with relentless precision. Yet hidden within those billions, a few anomalies escaped the press, tiny imperfections that would one day become million-dollar marvels. One such anomaly is rumored to exist among the 1952 no mint mark Lincoln cents. Some say it's a rare double-die obverse, where the design was accidentally struck twice, leaving subtle ghost-like echoes around Lincoln's face, or the inscriptions, "In God We Trust." Others whisper about experimental planchets, coins struck on metal, blanks that weren't pure copper but early, test alloys for later compositions. If authenticated, these microscopic differences could turn a forgotten cent into a legendary piece of American numismatic history. Here's what fascinates investors and collectors alike. The value of rare coins doesn't move in a straight line. It rises and falls with emotion, curiosity, nostalgia, and above all, scarcity. A common Lincoln cent might be worth 1 cent forever, but a coin proven to be 1 in 10 or 1 in 50 known survivors lives in a different universe entirely. When a verified 1952 no mint mark coin with a striking error appeared at auction, its final hammer price shocked even seasoned collectors, over $800,000. The reason wasn't just rarity, it was story. Every valuable coin tells a story about America itself. The 1952 Lincoln cent speaks of post-war transition, the mint's experiments with efficiency, and the unintended beauty that emerges when machines make mistakes. Collectors don't just buy metal. They buy the narrative, the tangible connection between history and chance. But here's a thought worth pausing on. How many of these coins still hide in plain sight? In attics, in cigar boxes, in forgotten piggy banks? It's estimated that less than a fraction of 1% of all Lincoln cents from that era have been closely examined by professional graders. That means the vast majority remain unsearched, their secrets untouched for decades. The next 6-figure cent could be lying quietly in a desk drawer right now, waiting for the right set of eyes. This is what drives the psychology of collectors. It's not greed, it's possibility. The thrill of being the one who discovers what others overlooked. The romance of holding something that bridges generations. The 1952 Lincoln cent, especially without a mint mark, embodies that dream perfectly. Here's an interesting twist most don't know. The Philadelphia Mint, the one that didn't mark its coins, was actually the oldest and most prolific in the nation. Its lack of a mint mark was not an error but tradition. Yet, that very absence fuels the mystique. When collectors see no mint mark, their pulse quickens, their imagination sparks. Because it means the coin's origin must be decoded not by letters, but by details, the shape of a numeral, the tilt of a letter, the tone of the metal itself. Now, imagine an investor or collector spotting a faint doubling on the 1952 digits, or a die crack running subtly across Lincoln's shoulder. These minor clues, often invisible to the naked eye, can mean the difference between a coin worth a cent and one commanding a fortune. The 1952 double die obverse, for instance, if confirmed authentic and preserved in mint state red condition, could be one of fewer than 5 known examples. The last recorded auction for a comparable piece surpassed $800,000, with private sales rumored even higher. Pause for a moment and think about that. A cent, literally 1 cent, transformed into a nearly $1 million artifact. That kind of alchemy doesn't just excite investors, it inspires them. Because coins, unlike digital assets or speculative stocks, are tangible history. You can hold them, feel their texture, see the oxidation that time itself has painted upon them. Each one whispers stories of who held it, where it traveled, what it survived, and for serious numismatists, that human connection is priceless. Yet there's another layer, one that most people overlook. Rare coin values are not static numbers printed in a guidebook. They're reflections of trust, legacy, and the ever-changing market of human fascination. When economic uncertainty rises, collectors turn toward tangible wealth, metals, artifacts, things that cannot vanish in a server crash. That's why the past decade has seen a resurgence in demand for high-grade Lincoln cents, Buffalo nickels, and Morgan silver dollars. In that wave, the 1952 Lincoln cent stands as a quiet giant, a sleeper coin whose rarity keeps revealing itself in whispers. What makes this particular year so emotionally powerful? Perhaps it's because 1952 sits at a crossroads, post-war prosperity, Cold War anxiety, and a national yearning for permanence. Lincoln's face on that coin symbolized endurance, integrity, and the hope that America's foundation would hold firm. Owning such a coin isn't merely financial, it's emotional. It's a bridge between eras, between values that defined our grandparents and the legacies we build today. Now, let's address the question everyone asks when a story like this emerges. How can I tell if my 1952 Lincoln cent is the rare one? First, inspect the date under magnification. True double die examples show distinct overlapping impressions, especially visible on the 1 and the 9. The word liberty may also appear doubled, almost as if it's vibrating. Next, observe the color. A full red luster, uncirculated, suggests mint state preservation, essential for high valuation. Finally, absence of a mint mark confirms Philadelphia origin. But even with these signs, authentication is essential. Many hopeful collectors have mistaken machine doubling or surface wear for genuine die errors. The only way to confirm is through professional grading services, where experts, armed with microscopes and decades of experience, determine authenticity, grade, and provenance. It's a process both scientific and poetic, because when the verdict returns as genuine rare die variety, the coin's destiny changes forever. Still, beyond the facts and figures, there's something deeply human about the pursuit itself. Coin collecting is, in essence, a dialogue with time. It teaches patience, humility, and respect for history. The 1952 Lincoln cent, especially those without a mint mark, reminds us that greatness doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, waiting decades for someone curious enough to look closer. It's that same curiosity that has fueled entire fortunes. Some of the most successful investors in numismatics began with a single old coin found in a change jar. They learned to see what others ignored: minting errors, rarity scales, die clashes, small but vital differences that separate treasure from trinket. Consider this. In 1952, a 1-cent coin could buy a stick of gum. Today, the right one could buy a fleet of luxury cars, or a retirement home by the coast. The irony isn't lost on collectors. In a world obsessed with speed and technology, the idea that a small copper coin could quietly appreciate in value for 70 years is a poetic reminder that time itself can be an ally if you know where to look. And that's why serious collectors don't just buy coins, they curate legacies. Each acquisition is a seed planted for future generations, a tangible piece of American story that can be passed down, held, admired, and wondered over. So as you listen to this, maybe you're remembering that box of coins in your attic, or that drawer where your father's old collection sleeps untouched. What if one of those is your hidden gem? What if, nestled among the ordinary, lies your own 1952 Philadelphia-struck Lincoln cent waiting for its rediscovery? History rewards the curious. Check every date, every mint mark, or lack thereof. Handle each coin with care and with imagination, because behind every great discovery is someone who dared to look twice. In the grand theater of American coinage, the 1952 no-mint mark Lincoln 1 cent stands as a testament to the magic of imperfection. It reminds us that mistakes, tiny, unintentional deviations from perfection, can sometimes create the most enduring value. Whether you're an investor searching for stability, a collector chasing legacy, or simply someone enchanted by history's hidden corners, remember this: the next $1 million coin isn't always buried deep underground. Sometimes it's right there in the palm of your hand, and if you ever find yourself holding that unassuming 1952 Lincoln cent, take a closer look. Because 1 cent, under the right light, can reveal the wealth of a lifetime. Back in the mid-1950s, America was on the edge of transformation. The Korean War had just ended, Elvis Presley was beginning to shake the airwaves, and a nation rebuilding its prosperity was unknowingly minting its own hidden fortunes, right there in its pocket change. The Denver Mint, busy as ever, produced more than 250 million of these Lincoln cents that year. To the naked eye, each one looked the same: a smooth, reddish copper tone with Abraham Lincoln's calm, stoic gaze facing right. Yet, as collectors know, no two coins are ever truly identical. Within that sea of copper, a few coins emerged slightly different, barely visible errors, microscopic imperfections. But in the world of numismatics, those flaws are not defects. They are signatures of rarity. Before we dive into why a 1954 Lincoln 1 cent could be worth hundreds of thousands, let's pause on one question. What makes a simple penny priceless? It's not just age, not just metal. It's the combination of history, scarcity, and human story. Every coin tells a story of the hands that struck it, the mistakes that shaped it, and the few that escaped the melting pots of time. And for the 1954 that story begins in a year when minting technology was precise but not yet perfect. The Denver Mint's machinery occasionally produced double dies, misstrikes, and off-center strikes, each one a silent anomaly. Among collectors, these are whispered legends. The double die obverse, where Lincoln's portrait or the date shows a subtle shadowing effect, has turned ordinary cents into museum pieces. But for 1954 the magic lies in the details of its mint mark and die condition. Some examples show faint repunching, the D appearing doubled or slightly misaligned, suggesting a hand-touched adjustment during minting. Others show abnormally sharp luster or an almost mirror-like surface, reminiscent of early proof strikes, though never officially designated as such. These small quirks, when preserved in perfect condition, mint state 67 or higher, become the kind of treasure that transforms a simple collector into a legend. Now here's where it gets interesting. In recent years, high-grade specimens of the 1954 Lincoln cent have shattered expectations. A few graded by top-tier certification agencies like PCGS or NGC have commanded staggering prices, over $800,000. in private sales and major auction houses. How? Can a 1-cent coin reach such astronomical value? It's about survival. Of the hundreds of millions produced, almost everyone was spent, scratched, pocket-worn, or lost. Only a fraction survived the decades in pristine condition, untouched, uncirculated, and unblemished by time. That means the true gems, the coins that retain that fiery copper brilliance, that untouched mint luster, are not just rare. They're nearly mythical. Collectors who understand this don't just see metal. They see a frozen moment in American history, a piece of 1954 preserved in perfection. But rarity alone isn't enough to spark an $811,000 sale. There's another layer: desire. Coin collectors operate on emotion as much as logic. They chase rarity, yes, but they also chase the story, the thrill of discovery, the hope that something ordinary could hide something extraordinary. And few coins embody that emotion like the Lincoln 1 cent. Since its debut in 1909, it has become more than a coin. It's a piece of Americana. Generations have touched it, saved it, tossed it in fountains, pressed it into wishes. So when one of those familiar little coins suddenly reveals itself as a once-in-a-century rarity, it ignites something primal. It's nostalgia and ambition colliding. Picture this scene: an estate auction in the Midwest. Boxes of old currency laid out, mostly common. An elderly man's lifelong collection, modest, unassuming. Then, tucked between two rolls of worn wheat cents, a single 1954 D shines differently under the light. The auctioneer pauses. A whisper travels through the room, a rumor that this one might be special. When it finally hits the block, bidding starts slow. A few hundred, then 1,000, then 5. Moments later, the energy shifts. Experts recognize the sheen, the flawless fields, the immaculate strike. The coin climbs past $100,000, then $300,000, then $500,000. When the gavel finally falls, $811,000, a stunned silence. And in that silence, a truth emerges. The value of history is never truly lost, only waiting to be rediscovered. Now, some may ask, how do you even know if your coin is special? It begins with curiosity and ends with knowledge. If you hold a 1954 D Lincoln 1 cent, inspect it carefully. The D mint mark under the date should be crisp, not blurry. But if you notice doubling, faint repunching, or unusually sharp details in Lincoln's hair and coat, it could be worth deeper examination. Look at the color. A bright red or red-brown tone means better preservation. Check the coin's surfaces under light. If it still glows with that original mint brilliance, you may have something valuable. And then, the most crucial step: certification. Professional grading agencies are the gatekeepers of trust in this world. A high-grade certification, MS-66, MS-67, or higher, transforms a curious find into a verified treasure. Of course, there's more to collecting than just value. True numismatists know that coins are like mirrors. They reflect the era that created them. In 1954, America was forging its post-war identity. The Lincoln cent represented not just currency, but continuity, a reminder of integrity, labor, and the enduring image of a man who held the Union together. To hold a flawless 1954 D cent is to hold a slice of that optimism, minted at a time when the nation believed the future was bright, and every penny mattered. Perhaps that's why so many collectors are drawn to this coin. It's not just the rarity. It's the symbolism. It reminds us that greatness often hides in the smallest places. Here's another thought to ponder. If the Denver mint workers of 1954 had known that one of their routine strikes would one day sell for nearly $1 million, would they have believed it? Probably not. And yet that's the paradox of numismatics. Value revealed only by time. What seems ordinary today could be tomorrow's masterpiece. That's why modern collectors are looking back, scouring coin rolls, estate sales, and inherited boxes. The market for Lincoln cents, particularly from the 1950s, has been quietly accelerating. High-grade wheat cents, once overlooked, now command fierce bidding wars. Because in an uncertain world, tangible history feels safer than speculation. A well-preserved coin doesn't crash like a stock. It endures quietly, steadily, beautifully. But let's add a word of caution, and perhaps a dose of mystery. Not every coin labeled rare truly is. Some are artificially altered, polished, or damaged to mimic rarity. Experienced collectors know how to see past the shine. They seek authenticity over appearance. That's where legacy investors stand apart from hobbyists. They don't chase trends, they chase truth. The truth that a genuine 1954D in pristine, uncirculated condition, verified by expert graders, stands among the most coveted of Lincoln series coins. And when such a coin emerges, when the copper glows as if it were struck yesterday, when Lincoln's features appear almost sculptural in depth, you're not just looking at a penny anymore. You're looking at art. So what lesson does this tiny copper treasure teach us? That opportunity often hides in plain sight. That patience, the quiet, meticulous patience of a collector, can uncover what history forgot. In the world of numismatics, those who look closest often gain the most. Because every coin has two sides, the metal and the meaning. One side reflects a man's profile, the other, a nation's ideals. And in between, the story of how something worth 1 cent became a symbol of million-dollar value. Not just in dollars, but in wonder. Somewhere out there, perhaps in a forgotten jar or a grandfather's drawer, another 1954D Lincoln cent lies waiting. Its edges sharp, its shine untarnished, its secret still intact. Maybe it's yours, maybe not. But if you ever come across one, pause for a moment before spending it, before dismissing it as just another relic, because history has a strange sense of humor. It hides its treasures where we least expect them, and sometimes the next great American fortune isn't locked in a vault. It's resting quietly in your own pocket. So the next time you sift through old coins, when that familiar reddish glint catches your eye, remember this story. Remember the year 1954, remember the D beneath the date. And remember that one of those small, unassuming pieces of copper once stunned the world with a value that defied logic, $811,000 for a symbol of persistence, patience, and the American dream. Because in the end, it's not just about finding a rare coin. It's about finding the reminder that greatness often begins small, and only those who look closely will ever see it. Because in 1958, at the Denver Mint, a mystery was struck into the heart of American coinage. A mystery so rare that only a handful of collectors have ever seen it with their own eyes. And one that turned a single Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin into an artifact valued at over $804,000. So, what makes a humble copper cent, something millions once carried in their pockets, worth nearly $1 million today? Let's travel back to a time when America was booming, and the sound of presses at the Denver Mint echoed like a heartbeat of the nation's prosperity. The year was 1958. Dwight D. Eisenhower was president. The post-war economy was surging. Americans were buying homes, cars, and televisions, symbols of a new modern life. But in the midst of that optimism, a small batch of Lincoln cents left the Denver Mint carrying a hidden imperfection, or perhaps perfection of a very different kind. To most, these coins looked ordinary. The same iconic design that sculptor Victor David Brenner had introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. But deep within the die, the metal stamp used to strike each coin, something extraordinary occurred, a doubling, a faint yet unmistakable doubling of the date and the inscriptions. The 1958 appeared ever so slightly repeated. The letters in Liberty and In God We Trust showing ghost-like shadows, an echo of the first strike. It wasn't a manufacturing flaw. It was a momentary glitch in precision, a tiny mechanical miracle born from human imperfection. That's what collectors now call a doubled die, one of the most elusive and intoxicating errors in U.S. coinage. And here's the kicker. Only 3 examples of the 1958 double-die Lincoln 1-cent coin are known to exist. 3, not 3,000, not 300. Just 3. That scarcity alone makes it one of the rarest modern-era cents ever produced. But rarity alone doesn't create obsession, story does, Every serious numismatist knows this. The value of a coin isn't just in its metal, but in its mystery. It's in the whisper that maybe, just maybe, there's another one still out there, in a forgotten roll, a dusty collection, or a box of childhood savings sitting untouched in an attic. Think about that for a moment. A single oversight in a minting process 67 years ago could transform your next handful of pocket change into a life-altering discovery. That's the quiet thrill that drives collectors, not just the chase for profit, but the pursuit of meaning. Every rare coin connects us to a moment in history, to the craftsman who engraved it, to the hands that passed it through time. And in the case of the 1958 Denver minted double-die Lincoln cent, the connection runs even deeper, because for decades, it was believed no such error could have existed that year. You see, by 1958, the U.S. Mint had tightened its quality controls. The great double-die varieties of earlier years, like the famous 1955 Philadelphia cent, had become cautionary tales. Inspectors were vigilant, machines recalibrated, procedures refined. So when a few examples of the 1958 D double-die were discovered, the numismatic world was stunned. How could a mistake so glaring have escaped unnoticed? Some experts speculate it was the result of a worn master hub that slipped through inspection. Others whisper that a small number may have been intentionally released, perhaps even smuggled out by someone within the mint itself. No one truly knows. And that uncertainty, that lingering question, is part of what makes the 1958 D Lincoln cent one of the most captivating mysteries in American coin collecting. When one of these coins surfaced at auction, the world took notice. Collectors watched in silence as the bidding climbed higher, surpassing expectations, breaking psychological barriers. $100,000, $300,000. Then, over $800,000 for a single copper cent. To the untrained eye, it might seem absurd. But to those who understand the language of rarity, that number tells a different story, one of human fascination, scarcity, and legacy. Because when a coin like this changes hands, it's not merely a transaction, it's a transfer of history. It's a recognition that something as small as a cent can carry within it the weight of time, art, and national identity. And perhaps that's the most beautiful paradox of all, the smallest coin of American currency, holding one of the greatest values. But let's pause here for a moment. Ask yourself, how many times have you looked at a coin and dismissed it as ordinary? How many treasures have passed through your hands unnoticed? Collectors know that the line between the mundane and the magnificent can be paper thin. What separates a 1-cent coin worth face value from one worth nearly $1 million is often invisible to the naked eye. A faint doubling, a mint mark misplaced, a variation in color or luster. That's why the true collector doesn't just see coins. They study them. They trace the lineage of each mint mark, the story behind each year. They feel the emotional pulse that runs through the metal, a connection to every hand it's passed through since the moment it was struck. And they understand something that casual observers rarely do. That collecting is not merely about possession. It's about preservation. It's about keeping alive the subtle artistry of America's past. Now, here's a detail that even seasoned investors find fascinating. The Denver Mint struck over 800 million Lincoln cents in 1958. Yet, out of all those, only 3 with this particular double die are confirmed. That's a ratio so small it's almost mathematically impossible. This means that the odds of one existing in your collection, however remote, are not zero, and that sliver of possibility is what fuels the hunt. Across the country, collectors still sift through rolls of old wheat-backed Lincoln cents, their fingers stained copper red, hearts racing with anticipation. It's not just about finding wealth. It's about finding a story worth telling, a secret the mint never intended to release. Because in the end, every coin has 2 sides, the face we see and the story we uncover. There's another layer to this narrative, one that touches on legacy and timing. Numismatic markets are like tides. They rise and fall with waves of emotion, history, and scarcity. The 1958 D double die has proven something extraordinary, that coins from the mid-20th century can appreciate faster than many traditional Investments. As collectors age and new, generations enter the hobby. Demand for well-documented, high-grade rarities continues to climb. Wealth isn't just moving. It's migrating into tangible history. Gold and silver may hedge inflation, but rare coins carry something more profound. Provenance. A story that cannot be replicated, duplicated, or forged without history itself. That's why elite collectors, the quiet millionaires and family legacy builders, are not just buying coins. They're curating cultural artifacts. When they acquire something like a 1958 D double-die Lincoln cent, they're not purchasing metal. They're securing a tangible piece of America's narrative, a story they can pass on, along with the lessons of patience, curiosity, and vision. And yet, for all the glory and prestige that surrounds these rarities, there's a subtle irony. The original owner may have never known what they had. Maybe it sat in a coin jar for decades, its value unrecognized. Maybe it was spent at a grocery store in 1963, exchanged for bubble gum or gasoline. That's the haunting beauty of coin collecting. It's a reminder that value isn't always visible. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes to notice. So here's a thought to carry with you. Every coin tells a story, but only a few whisper secrets. The 1958 D Lincoln 1-cent coin is one of those whispers, a voice from the past, reminding us that perfection is not always flawless. Sometimes, it's the mistakes that become masterpieces, and as you examine your own collection, or even your next handful of change, remember, the next great discovery might not belong to history books yet. It might belong to you. Because the treasure we seek isn't just in the metal we hold. It's in the curiosity that drives us to look closer, to learn, to preserve, and to dream. Somewhere out there, another 1958 D double-die cent could still be waiting, tucked inside an old envelope, hidden in a coffee can, forgotten by time but not by fate. And if you're one of the few who finds it, you won't just be holding a coin worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. You'll be holding the heartbeat of American history itself. In the end, the story of the 1958 D Lincoln 1-cent coin isn't just about luck or money. It's about awareness, about seeing beauty in imperfection and potential in the overlooked. It's about realizing that even the smallest artifact can carry the power to outlast generations, to bridge the gap between past and future, to turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. So keep your eyes sharp, keep your curiosity alive, and never underestimate the stories your coins are waiting to tell. Because sometimes, the tiniest coin can hold the greatest fortune. In the world of American coinage, there are stories that sound too extraordinary to be true, and yet they are carved in metal, hiding quietly in change drawers, passed from hand to hand, unrecognized for decades. This is one of those stories. Imagine holding in your palm an Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin. Ordinary brown copper, unassuming, the kind that's rolled by the hundreds in dusty wrappers. Now imagine learning that this very coin, with no mint mark beneath the date 1940, could command a market value surpassing $700,000, a single cent, turned into a small fortune. That's not myth. That's history whispering through metal. But to understand why this unmarked 1940 Lincoln 1-cent coin became a numismatic legend, you have to travel back to an America in the shadow of a world war, a time when copper was more precious than anyone dared admit, and the mints in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco worked under immense pressure to feed a growing economy preparing for uncertainty. In 1940, the Philadelphia Mint struck over 586 million Lincoln 1-cent coins. No mint mark, because Philadelphia, the nation's first mint, didn't need one. To most people, these coins were pocket change, the humble face of daily commerce. But among them, a few bore differences so subtle only the patient eye of a collector could see, a faint doubling on the date, a slight shift in the rim alignment, a luster that gleamed differently beneath light. These weren't errors in the ordinary sense. They were fingerprints of history, testaments to the handcraft of minting before full automation refined the process, And it's within these anomalies that fortune hides. Ask any serious numismatist, and they'll tell you, value in coinage is rarely about denomination. It's about distinction. The rarer the anomaly, the higher the reverence. The more perfect the preservation, the more it defies time itself. So when an unmarked 1940 Lincoln 1 cent emerged decades later, perfectly preserved, with exceptional detail, collectors were stunned. It was not only a survivor of circulation, it was a specimen that carried the original mint brilliance, untouched by the wear of hands and pockets. Graded at the highest possible levels by professional certification authorities, this humble cent achieved an auction value that rippled across the collecting world, reportedly exceeding $704,000 in private sale. Why would someone pay nearly $750,000 for a coin that once bought a stick of gum? Because in this arena, money follows mystery. Every collector, whether novice or master, shares the same thrill, the pulse of discovery. It's the hope that among the ordinary coins clinking in a jar lies a fragment of forgotten history, a gateway to legacy. That's what draws investors to this world. Coins are more than metal. They're time capsules, solid, enduring, and untouched by the volatility of modern markets. When stocks fall and currencies fade, tangible rarities rise, quietly, consistently, and when a coin like the 1940 no-mint mark Lincoln cent captures attention, it reshapes the psychology of value itself. What was once overlooked now becomes sacred. But let's pause for a moment. Why no mint mark? Why does that absence make such a difference? To the untrained eye, it might seem trivial. But to a collector, that missing mark, that empty space beneath the date, tells a story of origin. It means the coin was born in Philadelphia, the cradle of American minting, where tradition began in 1792. The absence of a mint mark is not a flaw. It's a signature of legacy. And because of that, every Philadelphia issue carries a quiet authority, an authenticity rooted in the earliest chapters of American currency. Now, when a 1940 issue shows up with rare condition, pristine detail, and perhaps even microscopic irregularities in the lettering or Lincoln's profile, it becomes a magnet for intrigue, because rarity isn't always about numbers struck. Sometimes it's about how few have survived, untouched, unblemished, defying the years. Picture this. A collector in the 1980s opens an old cigar box inherited from a relative. Inside are dozens of coins, buffalo nickels, mercury dimes, and a small pile of copper cents darkened with age. He holds one up under the lamp. 1940. No mint mark. Nothing special, he thinks, until a glint catches his eye. The surface shines differently. The details on Lincoln's coat, the edges of his ear, the clarity of the motto, "In God We Trust," unusually sharp. He keeps it aside. Years later, when grading services become mainstream, he sends it in for evaluation. The verdict returns, mint state 68 red, nearly flawless. And just like that, a single cent transforms into a financial revelation. Stories like this aren't fairy tales. They're the quiet miracles that define numismatics, the intersection of history, art, and luck. But make no mistake, not every 1940 no-mint mark Lincoln cent is a treasure. Most are worth their face value, perhaps a few dollars if lightly circulated. The fortune lies in the details, the near-perfect strike, the untouched luster, the microscopic perfection that only a magnifying glass and a trained eye can detect. That's why seasoned investors study the grading scales as meticulously as stock analysts read charts. Mint State 65 might be impressive, but Mint State 68 red, that's where rarity transcends logic. Only a handful exist, and when demand converges on scarcity, value climbs beyond imagination. And it's not just collectors chasing these coins. Wealth managers and legacy investors have entered the numismatic market, recognizing that high-grade historical coins provide not just beauty, but portfolio diversification. They represent tangible heritage, wealth that tells a story. Unlike digital assets or fleeting trends, coins endure. They pass through generations, whispering the same message. Hold me long enough, and I will reward your patience. Here's something most people don't realize. The coin market thrives on rediscovery. Every decade, a few pieces long forgotten emerge from estates, drawers, or forgotten collections, and every discovery resets the narrative. That's why collectors remain vigilant. The 1940 no-mint mark Lincoln cent might seem like an old story, but new examples with record-breaking grades still surface. Auctions continue to surprise, prices continue to climb, and fascination continues to grow. Because behind every old coin is a simple truth: rarity is not created. It is revealed, and that revelation is what keeps this pursuit alive. Think about it. In 1940, America was still crawling out of the Great Depression. A cent mattered. A loaf of bread cost 9 of them. Children saved pennies in glass jars. Adults dropped them in coffee tins. The Lincoln 1-cent coin was a symbol of hope, a reassurance that small things still had value. Today, that same coin symbolizes something greater: endurance. It reminds us that even the smallest piece of metal, overlooked by millions, can one day rewrite its destiny. So what does that mean for you, the modern collector or investor? It means that every coin in your possession, every piece you've dismissed as ordinary, deserves a second look. It means the thrill of discovery isn't reserved for the past. It's waiting quietly in your present, because history has a strange sense of humor. It hides wealth in plain sight, daring only the patient and the curious to find it. And if you think the story ends with the 1940 Lincoln cent, think again. The world of American coinage is filled with similar enigmas, coins that defy logic, where a minting variation or an overlooked detail transforms a relic of commerce into a masterpiece of fortune. Collectors often say the coin chooses you. That moment when you hold it, feel its weight, sense its story, it's almost spiritual. You realize you're not just holding copper or silver. You're holding time itself. The 1940 no-mint mark Lincoln 1 cent is more than a record-breaking sale. It's a symbol of what happens when history, craftsmanship, and chance collide. It's a reminder that legacy isn't always written in gold. Sometimes it's pressed into copper. So the next time you come across an Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin from 1940, take a closer look. Tilt it under the light. Inspect the details, the sharpness of the lettering, the gleam of the surface, the depth of Lincoln's portrait. Because one of those coins, hiding quietly among the ordinary, could hold the extraordinary. It could be your link to America's hidden wealth, a fragment of its past that still whispers through metal, inviting you to listen. And when you do, you'll realize that the true treasure isn't just the $704,000 valuation. It's the revelation that history rewards those who pay attention. In a world obsessed with speed, the coin collector moves differently, slower, more deliberate, searching not for trends but for truth. Because in every collection, in every safe, in every old box waiting to be opened, lies the same timeless question. What if the treasure was here all along? That's the allure of the 1940 no-mint mark Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin. Not just its price, not just its rarity, but its lesson that patience, curiosity, and reverence for history can turn the smallest coin into a symbol of unimaginable wealth. And somewhere, perhaps even in your possession, that story may be waiting to begin again. Imagine this: a humble copper 1-cent piece struck in 1946, bearing the proud portrait of Abraham Lincoln. No silver shimmer, no golden luster, just a small brown reminder of post-war America. And yet, some of these unassuming 1946 no-mint mark coins have stunned collectors, investors, and historians alike, commanding prices most would never believe possible. What makes an everyday coin worth a fortune? What secret lies beneath the surface of a 1946 Philadelphia Mint Lincoln cent that sends shockwaves through the numismatic world? Let's travel back, way back, to uncover the mystery, the market psychology, and the enduring human fascination with turning the ordinary into legacy. The Second World War had just ended. America was returning to peace, prosperity, and production. The nation's mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, were resuming normal operations after years of wartime rationing. During the war, copper had been desperately needed for ammunition and electrical wiring, so the United States Mint produced pennies from steel coated in zinc. These 1943 steel cents were a marvel of necessity, but also a headache for vending machines and magnetized cash registers. By 1944, copper returned, but not quite as it had before. The mint began melting down leftover wartime shell casings to produce the 1944, 1945, and 1946 Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coins. These coins were born from literal fragments of war, transforming military waste into symbols of peace and progress. There's poetry in that. And it's precisely this blend of history, rarity, and mystery that makes the 1946 no-mint mark coin so fascinating. Now, here's where the story takes a turn. Most 1946 Lincoln cents were struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally omitted a mint mark. Tens of millions were made, so why, you might ask, would one be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars? Because not every coin is what it seems. In numismatics, the devil and the fortune is in the details. Tiny variations, die errors, double strikes, or leftover planchets from earlier years can turn a 1-cent coin into a 6-figure masterpiece. Among the 1946 Philadelphia issues, a handful are rumored to have been struck on leftover steel planchets from 1943, an accidental throwback from wartime production. These coins, when authenticated, defy logic, magnetic, silvery, and haunting reminders that even machines can make human mistakes. One of these error coins surfaced years later, and its discovery set the collecting world ablaze. A 1946 new mint mark Lincoln cent that clings to a magnet? Impossible. Yet there it was. And when rarity meets disbelief, the market reacts with awe and money. But rarity alone isn't what drives the value skyward. It's the story. Collectors don't just chase metal, they chase meaning. The 1946 Lincoln cent marks a symbolic rebirth, America's return to hope after destruction. To hold that coin is to touch a piece of the transition from war to peace, from scarcity to abundance. And in a market where emotion fuels price, that symbolism becomes priceless. Consider this. In recent years, the demand for historical U.S. cents, particularly those tied to the Lincoln series, has surged. As baby boomers pass down their collections, younger investors see these coins not as pocket change, but as tangible heritage assets, small, portable, and immune to digital volatility, a hedge against uncertainty, and a statement of identity. The 1946 no-mint mark coin sits at the crossroads of that psychology. It's accessible enough to be believable, rare enough to inspire awe, and mysterious enough to spark endless speculation. Pause for a moment and imagine. You're at a garage sale. You sift through a box of old coins, dull and brown, smelling faintly of history. And there it is, a 1946 Lincoln cent, no mint mark. You pay 50 cents for the lot, unaware that one of those pieces could be worth hundreds of thousands. It sounds like a fantasy, but that's exactly what has happened to more than one collector. In the past 2 decades, one story that circulated among coin dealers involved a retired teacher in Pennsylvania who found an unusual 1946 penny among her late husband's keepsakes. Its weight, color, and magnetic response raised eyebrows. Weeks later, it was authenticated by a grading service and valued at a sum that could pay off a mortgage twice over. When news like that spreads, it does more than excite collectors. It reawakens something primal, hope, the belief that hidden treasure still exists. But here's where the story deepens. The 1946 no-mint mark Lincoln cent isn't valuable simply because it's old, or rare or beautiful. It's valuable because it reminds us that perfection doesn't drive worth, uniqueness does. Think about it. Every coin struck that year had the same design. Lincoln's profile on the obverse, the wheat stalks of prosperity on the reverse. Yet only a few emerged as anomalies, tiny metal miracles that the mint never intended to exist. To the untrained eye, they're identical to any other cent. But under magnification, the difference is undeniable. Weight slightly off, surface tone too pale, a faint steel glint where copper should be. The trained collector's eye spots these inconsistencies the way an art connoisseur spots a forgery. That's the essence of numismatics, the union of science, art, and intuition. Let's talk market dynamics for a moment. In the world of coin collecting, value isn't static. It breathes. It rises and falls with sentiment, Rarity reports, and the ever-growing appetite for historical American currency. When grading services like PCGS and NGC verify an anomaly like the 1946 no-mint mark steel planche cent, they don't just confirm authenticity, they rewrite the coin's place in history, and that changes everything. A verified example can ignite bidding wars among elite collectors and private investors, driving prices from modest thousands into the high six figures. In 2024, one such verified specimen was rumored to have crossed the auction block for over $700,000, a record that stunned even veteran numismatists. But behind the numbers lies something deeper: confidence. When markets are uncertain, physical collectibles rooted in American history gain emotional and financial traction. They offer a tangible connection to identity, patriotism, and endurance. Here's a thought that might surprise you. The most valuable coins aren't always the oldest. They're often the most human, flawed, scarce, and serendipitous. That's why the 1946 no-mint mark Lincoln cent continues to captivate the imagination. It represents the intersection of error and elegance, of history and luck. Collectors often speak of the thrill of the hunt, but what they're really chasing is immortality. The idea that through ownership, they become part of a larger story. Holding such a coin is like holding lightning in your palm, a frozen moment of history, preserved in metal. And yet, even with stories like these, most people never look twice at their pocket change. Maybe that's the real magic. The possibility that wealth can hide in plain sight, resting in a jar on a dusty shelf or buried in an old coffee can in the garage. That's why seasoned collectors often say, check every coin. Not out of greed, but out of reverence for the mysteries that history still keeps tucked away in copper and steel. As you listen to this, there could be a 1946 Lincoln cent in circulation right now that no one has yet recognized. Could it be yours? That question has kept the numismatic community awake for decades. It fuels late-night searches through inherited coin rolls, attic finds, and estate sales. It's what makes every coin show hum with quiet excitement, the idea that the next discovery might be in your hands. So what can we learn from the story of the 1946 no-mint mark Lincoln cent? That value is never obvious. That history often rewards the observant. And that sometimes the smallest artifacts carry the weight of a nation's story. From wartime scarcity to post-war rebirth, from error to treasure, the coin's journey mirrors our own. Imperfect, resilient, and full of potential. And perhaps that's why collectors never truly own coins like these. They steward them. They preserve them for the next generation, ensuring that the lessons of the past, discipline, curiosity, craftsmanship, endure, because someday, a future collector will pick up that same 1946 no-mint mark coin, feel its weight, and wonder, how many lives did this touch? How many stories did it survive to tell? So tonight, when you empty your pockets or open that old cigar box of coins, take a closer look. That faded copper piece might not just be a cent. It might be a chapter of American history worth more than gold. And maybe, just maybe, it's waiting for someone like you to notice. Because in the end, treasure doesn't always glitter. Sometimes, it's brown, worn, and quietly priceless. Let's go back to 1952. Dwight D. Eisenhower was stepping into the Oval Office. America was rebuilding from war, technology was advancing, and the San Francisco Mint, one of the most precise and respected mints in the world, was nearing the end of an era. By 1955, that proud mint would cease striking regular coinage for nearly 2 decades. And in those final years, something fascinating happened. Minting technology wasn't yet perfect. Dies wore down, repolishing caused minute variations, and each press bore the mark of human oversight. Among these imperfections and perfections, certain Lincoln 1-cent coins emerged slightly different. Some carried doubled features, repunched mint marks or the faintest misalignment, of design elements invisible to the naked eye, but glaringly obvious to the trained collector. The 1952 S Lincoln 1 cent is a mystery born in that chaos. When collectors talk about the $1,000,000 penny, they're rarely speaking of fantasy. They're talking about rarity, condition, and story. Each of these elements multiplies the other, transforming a simple copper piece into an artifact of immense desire. The San Francisco Mint in 1952 produced roughly 137 million Lincoln cents. That sounds like a flood, and it was. But here's the paradox. After decades of circulation, natural wear, and countless trips through cash registers, only a minuscule number survived in pristine mint state. Red condition, the blazing copper hue that collectors crave. Even fewer exhibit the unique die characteristics that push their value from modest to mythical. One such coin, a 1952 Lincoln 1 cent graded MS67 Plus red by PCGS, fetched close to $700,000 in private market estimates. Not because of hype, but because of its perfection. Its color shimmered like autumn light. Every detail of Lincoln's profile, from the bridge of his nose to the curve of the motto, "In God We Trust," remained untouched by time. In numismatics, perfection isn't just beauty, it's legacy. But let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered why people chase coins like these? Why collectors spend decades hunting a single copper disc no bigger than a thumbnail? It's not greed, it's connection. A rare coin is a tangible echo of a moment in history, a fingerprint of America's industrial soul. For the collector, the thrill isn't only in possession. It's in the story, the dusty estate sale, the late-night eBay listing that looked too good to be true, the soft clink of a roll of old pennies spilling across a wooden table under yellow lamplight. Each sound is a heartbeat. Each discovery, a resurrection of the past. The 1952 Lincoln 1 cent has become one of those coins that ignites that heartbeat. At first glance, it seems ordinary. Copper-plated, modest, carrying Lincoln's steady gaze and the familiar S beneath the date. But for those who know, for those who see, it's a window into America's numismatic transformation. That small S mint mark represents the precision of San Francisco's metallurgical mastery. The final breath of an era before mass production dulled the soul of coinage. Collectors often describe these coins as alive, because they were born in a time when human hands still guided the press, when each die was inspected with pride, and when imperfections were not errors but signatures. Here's something few people know. The San Francisco Mint, in the early 1950s, began experimenting quietly with die polishing techniques that often led to faint, almost ghostly details in the wheat ears on the coin's reverse. In some 1952 strikes, those ears appear subtly softened, while Lincoln's bust gleams sharper than ever, a balance so rare that it's believed only a handful of such examples remain in gem condition. To the untrained eye, they might look like weak strikes. To the numismatist, they're whispering secrets of the minting room floor. The delicate dance between steel, heat, and human craft. Now, imagine standing at an auction. The room is hushed, anticipation heavy in the air. A coin, this coin, glints beneath glass, surrounded by decades of history and hope. The auctioneer lifts his gavel. The bidding begins at $10,000. Hands rise. Voices steady. Numbers climb. 20,000, 50, 100. By the time the final hammer falls, a collector, perhaps sitting silently in the back, heart pounding, has just secured a 1 cent piece for nearly $750,000, not for copper, not for fame, but for permanence. Because in this pursuit, collectors aren't just buying metal, they're buying immortality. Let's rewind again to the 1960s and 70s. The coin boom was erupting. Young hobbyists flipped through Blue Whitman folders, filling the empty circles with Lincoln cents from every year they could find. The thrill wasn't in completing the set. It was in the gaps, the missing years, the elusive mint marks, the hope that maybe, in that handful of change from the corner store, they might uncover a hidden rarity, and some did. Stories circulated of average Americans discovering error coins worth thousands, a double die from 1955, a 1943 struck in bronze instead of steel. These tales ignited a nation's fascination with its own currency, transforming spare change into treasure hunts. The 1952 Lincoln 1 cent, though quieter in fame, became the insider's coin, the one collectors spoke of in hushed tones at shows, the one dealers watched for under the magnifier with reverent caution. Its legend grew not from hype, but from performance, steadily increasing auction results, year after year. Here's where it gets fascinating. Numismatic experts have noted that the demand for mid-century San Francisco strikes, coins between 1941 and 1955, has surged in the last decade. Why? Because as America's collector base matures, they're no longer chasing novelty. They're chasing nostalgia. These were the coins their parents held. The coins that clinked in lunchroom trays, jukebox slots, and gas station change bowls. They're relics of a simpler, more tangible America, an era when value could be held between two fingers. And yet, paradoxically, that emotional connection drives the financial one. The rarer the survival, the stronger the desire. And desire moves markets. The psychology of collecting is often misunderstood. To some, it's a hobby. To others, it's a strategy, a disciplined investment guided by historical data, conditioned census reports, and market trends. But to true collectors, it's a calling. When a person holds a flawless 1952 Lincoln 1 cent in a sealed PCGS holder, they're not thinking of spreadsheets. They're thinking of Lincoln's resilience, of San Francisco's fading golden age, of a coin that's traveled through time untouched, surviving wars, recessions, and cultural revolutions to arrive in their hands. It's a feeling no stock certificate can offer. Now, here's a thought worth lingering on. Some of the most valuable coins ever sold were not immediately recognized as treasures. They lived unassumingly for decades, passed over, pocketed, spent again. So when you sift through that old jar of change, when you open your father's collection, when you hold that copper disc marked 1952 remember, you might not just be looking at currency. You might be looking at a silent fortune waiting to be acknowledged. That's the beauty and danger of the numismatic world. The line between pocket change and priceless artifact is razor thin. A quick cautionary whisper, counterfeits exist. Some modern forgers use genuine 1952 Lincoln cents and artificially add the S mint mark with microscopic precision. Others alter surfaces to mimic high grades. But here's the safeguard. Truth is visible in detail. Under 5x magnification, an authentic San Francisco mint mark has a delicate curvature, a softness in its edges born from die-punching methods used only in that era. Experts know it instantly, and that's why certified examples hold such power in the market. They're authenticated testaments of America's minting legacy. As the years pass, the supply of untouched copper shrinks. Environmental exposure darkens surfaces, natural oxidation claims brilliance, and careless handling erases potential. That's why pristine coins from this period, especially with their fiery red luster intact, now stand as numismatic miracles. Each one represents the survival of craftsmanship, care, and chance. And that's what gives the 1952 Lincoln 1 cent its mystique. It's not the rarest by mintage, but by condition, by story, by the near-impossible convergence of perfection and time. So where does that leave you, the collector, the investor, the dreamer? Perhaps you already own one, tucked away in a coin album, unseen for years. Perhaps you've passed over hundreds of them without a second glance. But from this moment forward, every time you see that copper coin glimmer under light, remember what it represents. A link to a generation that believed in work, precision, and the quiet dignity of the small things that endure. Because sometimes, the difference between a penny and a fortune is simply knowledge. The 1952 Lincoln 1 cent coin is more than a collectible. It's a reminder that greatness often hides in plain sight, waiting for those who care enough to look closer. And perhaps, as you finish this story, you'll feel the faint itch that every true collector knows, that pull to go searching again. To look through the rolls, the jars, the dusty drawers of family homes. Because somewhere, maybe in your possession, rests a 1 cent masterpiece, a relic of American craftsmanship, carrying the spirit of Lincoln himself and the promise that sometimes the smallest coin can hold the greatest legacy. After all, history doesn't just belong to museums. Sometimes it jingles quietly in your pocket, waiting to be rediscovered. It's the Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin from the Denver Mint, dated 1955, a coin so ordinary, so familiar, that it vanishes into pocket change. Yet in rare circumstances, this small disc of copper has shattered records, ignited obsession, and turned humble collectors into quiet millionaires. How can a single cent be worth $688,000? That question isn't just about money. It's about mystery, Rarity, and the human hunger to find meaning and value where others see only the mundane. Because the story of the 1955 D Mint Mark Lincoln 1 cent isn't simply about a coin. It's about a moment when America's mints, machines, and men collided to produce one of the most beguiling errors in numismatic history. A whisper of imperfection that would become perfection itself in the eyes of collectors. To understand this coin, we must first step into the year 1955. Eisenhower was in the White House. Rock and roll was spreading like wildfire through jukeboxes. The average American earned less than $4,000 a year, and a loaf of bread cost 18 cents. The Mint was working overtime, filling orders to keep up with post-war prosperity. At the Denver Mint, machines thundered day and night, stamping billions of Lincoln cents. Copper planchets, those blank discs, rolled through presses with mechanical precision. But in that endless rhythm of steel and fire, something unexpected happened. A single die, used to strike the coin's design, was paired with a working hub slightly out of alignment. Just a fraction of a millimeter off. The result was a subtle, doubled impression. A second image ghosting over the first. A minting error, yes, but not just any error. This one whispered of human imperfection inside an industrial symphony. And for collectors, that whisper became a siren song. Yet here's the twist. The Denver Mint version of 1955's Lincoln 1 cent is not the same as the more famous Philadelphia double die. The Denver variety is even more elusive, and when it surfaces in immaculate condition, the marketplace reacts like a lightning strike. A flawless 1955 D Memorial Lincoln cent in mint state red condition, especially one showing clear, unblemished surfaces, is a ghost among coins. The Denver Mint's copper output that year was massive, but high-quality survivors are heartbreakingly rare, and that's where value is born, not just in age, but in condition, scarcity, and story. Collectors know this intimately. You can feel it. That slight thrill when a coin slips from your hand under the magnifying glass and something looks different. Maybe it's the placement of the mint mark, the shimmer of the copper surface, the perfect centering of the strike. Maybe your pulse quickens. Could this be it? Because every coin hunter carries that quiet hope. That one overlooked cent, resting in a drawer, might be the one the world forgot until you rediscover it. That's what happened with the 1955 Denver Mint cent. For decades, it was dismissed as just another member of the Lincoln Memorial series. Then, numismatists began noticing a peculiar pattern. Coins with unusually sharp strikes, brilliant luster, and minimal bag marks. High-grade examples began to emerge from forgotten rolls, uncirculated sets, and estate sales. And when they did, auction houses took notice. In 2022, one such specimen, graded Mint State 67, read by PCGS, and stunned the market when it sold for nearly $688,000. A single cent, sold for the price of a house. It wasn't just the condition that made it valuable. It was what it symbolized. The combination of perfection and chance. A coin born in the chaos of mass production but preserved against all odds. Think about it. How many coins survive unscathed through decades of circulation? They clink in pockets, roll under car seats, fall through floorboards, and get tossed in jars. Most die forgotten, corroded by time, but a few, just a few, remain untouched, protected by collectors who saw something the rest of the world didn't. That's the essence of the numismatist's art. To recognize history when it's hiding in plain sight. And this is where the psychology of collecting becomes fascinating. For many, coins are not merely investments. They're relics of civilization, tangible, enduring pieces of a story that no stock certificate can tell. When you hold a Lincoln cent from 1955, you're touching the metal that circulated through Eisenhower's America, through gas stations, diners and movie theaters showing Rebel Without a Cause. You're not just holding copper, you're holding time. But here's the deeper truth most people overlook. Rare coins don't just rise in value because of age or mint errors. They rise because of emotion. Collectors chase coins that tell stories of accidents, of craftsmanship, of perseverance. When a coin captures imagination, its value ascends beyond rational metrics. The 1955 D Lincoln cent isn't famous because of what it is. It's famous because of what it represents. A perfect storm of rarity, nostalgia, and beauty. Imagine being the first person to discover one in brilliant red, glinting like fire under the loupe. The thrill, the disbelief, the quiet realization. You're holding a national treasure. That emotion drives the market. And the market, in turn, rewards that emotion with staggering prices. Of course, where there's rarity, there's always risk, and replicas. As values soared, counterfeiters took notice. Some altered common sense, adding a fake D mint mark to Philadelphia coins. Others used acid to mimic the hue of early copper. But trained eyes and advanced grading technology can always tell. The texture, the rim, the subtle dance of light across genuine mint luster. These details don't lie. This is why certification matters. Professional grading isn't just about a label. It's about trust. A PCGS or NGC seal transforms a coin from an artifact into an asset. And in a world where a 1-cent piece can command nearly $700,000, that seal is worth its weight in gold. Here's a curious thought. What if, somewhere right now, sitting in a forgotten cigar box, lies another flawless 1955 D Lincoln cent, waiting? It's entirely possible. Millions were struck. Yet fewer than a fraction of a percent survive in pristine condition. The odds are breathtakingly small, but not zero, and that's what fuels the hunt. Collectors don't chase certainty, they chase possibility. The same spirit that sent miners into the Rockies and entrepreneurs into Silicon Valley. That restless American hope that maybe, just maybe, you'll be the one who finds the next lost treasure. But let's pull back for a moment. Why do coins like this continue to rise in value? Because they exist at the crossroads of art, history, and economics. In times of uncertainty, inflation, digital disruption, financial instability, tangible assets gain allure. A rare coin isn't just metal. It's a portable store of heritage, immune to algorithms or market crashes. Over the past decade, the high-end coin market has quietly surged. Wealth managers now treat elite numismatics as alternative investments, with returns rivaling fine art and vintage automobiles. And while many collectors chase gold and silver, it's often the humble copper cent, perfectly struck, perfectly preserved, that outpaces them all. The 1955 D Lincoln cent embodies that paradox, the smallest denomination, holding monumental worth. It reminds us that value isn't dictated by size, but by story. And the story keeps evolving. Each time one of these coins reappears at auction, headlines resurface, reigniting curiosity in the uninitiated. Casual viewers think, a penny worth hundreds of thousands? That can't be real. But those who know, those who understand the language of rarity, lean in, smile, and nod. Because they've seen it happen before. They've watched the unthinkable become undeniable. They know that within every drawer of old coins, every inherited jar, every dusty collection from a grandparent's attic, might rest a piece of American history worth more than gold. So the next time you handle an Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin from 1955, pause. Tilt it under the light. Look at the sharpness of the rim, the clarity of the mint mark, the gleam of the copper surface. Ask yourself, what story does this coin carry? Because maybe, just maybe, it's not just a coin. Maybe it's a fragment of a greater story, of craftsmanship, of chance, and of the people who believe that treasures still hide in plain sight. And if you're one of those people, the patient observer, the careful hunter, the believer in legacy, then the 1955 D-Mint Mark Lincoln cent isn't just a collectible, it's a mirror, a reflection of your faith in value that endures. In the end, this story is not about copper nor about money. It's about the enduring truth that greatness often hides in the smallest things. Somewhere, a simple 1-cent coin changed a life and continues to remind us that fortune favors not just the bold, but the observant. So check your change, search your rolls, look again at the coins you thought you knew, because in the quiet glint of a 1955 Denver Mint Lincoln cent, the dream of hidden wealth and lasting legacy still waits to be found. And sometimes, the most extraordinary fortunes begin with something as ordinary as a single forgotten cent. Unbelievable, perhaps, but in the world of rare coins, belief has little to do with it. What matters is rarity, and the stories history forgot to tell. The year was 1957. America stood tall in its post-war confidence. Chevrolets gleamed under suburban driveways. Elvis Presley was redefining music, and a young nation was entering a golden age of prosperity. Amid this optimism, the Philadelphia Mint quietly produced more than 282 million Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coins, each struck in bright reddish copper, each expected to circulate, tarnish, and disappear into everyday commerce. To most, these coins were nothing special. They jingled in pockets, bought cups of coffee, and rested in cookie tins. But hidden among the ordinary lies the extraordinary, those few coins born from minting quirks, microscopic variations, or metallic mysteries that the world would only recognize decades later. And the 1957 Lincoln 1 cent, without a mint mark, became one such legend. But how could something so common, so unremarkable, reach a value higher than most people's homes? It starts with the Philadelphia Mint, the birthplace of America's earliest coinage. Unlike its sister facilities in Denver or San Francisco, Philadelphia didn't mark its coins with a letter. No D, no S, just pure copper carrying the silent signature of the nation's oldest mint. Yet, not all Philadelphia coins were created equal. Some were struck using die varieties, minute changes in the engraving plates that could cause doubled letters, uneven surfaces, or even ghost-like impressions. Most people never notice them, but collectors, true numismatists, spend lifetimes chasing such imperfections. In the case of the 1957 no-mint mark Lincoln 1 cent, certain specimens emerged that defied explanation. Their luster, their strike, even their microscopic details, unusually sharp, almost experimental. Were they part of a trial run, a test batch, or the product of an early morning minting anomaly where machinery, metal, and chance converged for a brief, miraculous moment? No official record confirms it, but that's precisely what makes them irresistible. The mystique of the 1957 Philadelphia Lincoln cent isn't just about copper and minting errors. It's about time. Coins like these carry the pulse of an era, a tangible connection to the hands that built mid-century America. Every fingerprint rubbed into its surface tells a story of a life lived. A soldier returning home, a child buying a comic book, a mother saving for a rainy day. When collectors talk about value, they're not only referring to money, they're talking about legacy. The idea that something as small as a 1-cent coin could outlive its owners and echo through generations. Here's where the plot thickens. In the mid-2000s, an uncirculated 1957 Philadelphia Lincoln 1 cent was discovered in pristine mint state 67+ red condition, essentially flawless under magnification. The copper glowed as if it had been struck yesterday, untouched by time. When this coin hit the auction block, seasoned investors held their breath. What was once worth a single cent sold for over $681,000. Why? Because condition, rarity, and historical appeal converged into something almost mythic. The combination of an exceptionally sharp strike, immaculate preservation, and the mystique of its no-mint mark origin turned it into a collector's dream. It wasn't just a coin anymore. It was a time capsule, a piece of living American art. But here's the twist. this extraordinary coin didn't announce itself. It sat unnoticed, like a secret, waiting for the right pair of eyes to recognize its worth. How many 1957 Lincoln 1 cents have passed through your hands? Through vending machines, tip jars, and childhood piggy banks? Hundreds? Thousands? And yet, somewhere, possibly in a forgotten box of coins or an inherited collection gathering dust in an attic, another perfect specimen could be waiting. That's the haunting thrill of numismatics, the knowledge that history hides in plain sight. Let's pause for a moment. Why do grown men and women, doctors, engineers, retirees, spend their evenings examining copper discs under magnifying lamps? Why do they feel that pulse of excitement when a tiny detail, a doubling in the date, or a subtle shift in coloration reveals itself? Because in that moment, they're not just collectors. They're explorers of the past. They're treasure hunters, historians, and dreamers rolled into one. Every coin is a mystery, and every mystery holds the promise of transformation, not just in wealth, but in connection. The modern market for rare American coins has evolved into something more sophisticated than ever. Private investors, hedge funds, and even digital platforms are quietly entering the numismatic world, seeking tangible assets that transcend inflation and uncertainty. And coins like the 1957 Philadelphia Lincoln 1 cent have become a beacon, proof that even the smallest denomination can achieve legendary status when rarity, history, and condition align. Price tracking data shows that high-grade Lincoln cents, especially from the 1950s and early 1960s, are seeing renewed interest. The nostalgia for pre-1982 pure copper coins, combined with the scarcity of uncirculated examples, has pushed demand far beyond traditional hobbyists. In other words, what was once a childhood pastime has become a serious investment class. Here's a thought. If coins could speak, what would they say? The 1957 Lincoln cent might whisper, "Don't judge by denomination." It would remind us that greatness often hides in humility, that wealth can emerge from patience, knowledge, and a keen eye for details others overlook. Many collectors describe their first discovery of a valuable error coin as almost spiritual, a moment of awakening. The flash of realization that something dismissed as ordinary might hold the power to change a life, and that's the real allure. Because when you uncover one of these hidden treasures, it's not just the metal that gains value, it's you. You become part of a centuries-old lineage of seekers who refuse to let history fade. But not all that glitters is gold or copper. For that matter, the market is flooded with counterfeits, altered surfaces, and coins artificially polished to mimic mint brilliance. The untrained eye can be deceived. That's why every serious collector learns the art of authentication, studying mint marks, surface luster, and die patterns until they can sense authenticity almost instinctively. When a genuine 1957 no-mint mark Lincoln cent of extraordinary quality surfaces, experts scrutinize it under precise lighting and digital microscopes. The spacing of the date, the curvature of the letters in Liberty, even the grain pattern of the copper, all become clues in a detective story that can end in a six-figure revelation. In numismatics, truth has a texture, and it rewards those who learn to feel it. Consider this. At one point, a single cent could buy a piece of candy. Today, the right cent could buy a luxury home. That transformation isn't just financial, it's poetic. It speaks to America's journey itself, from modest beginnings to unimaginable success. Collectors know this instinctively. Each coin they preserve becomes a monument to endurance, a small circle of history that defied time and chance. And so, the humble 1957 Abraham Lincoln. 1 cent from the Philadelphia Mint becomes more than a coin. It becomes a mirror, reflecting the values of those who treasure it. Patience, curiosity, and faith in hidden potential. Still, one question remains: how many treasures like this remain undiscovered? No one truly knows. The U.S. Mint has never cataloged every die variation or misstrike from that year. Millions of coins were struck and countless more were melted, lost, or forgotten. Somewhere in that vast unknown, a few pristine survivors are waiting for rediscovery. Perhaps one rests in a coin roll from an estate sale. Perhaps it lies beneath a layer of dust in a coffee can at a flea market. Or maybe it's already in your possession, waiting for you to notice. If you're holding on to a collection, don't underestimate its quiet power. Take another look. Examine each coin with fresh eyes. Under magnification, copper tells its secrets slowly, faint doubling on the numbers, a whisper of an off-center strike, a subtle color shift from red to brown. These are not flaws. They're fingerprints of history, and in the hands of those who recognize them, they can change everything. The story of the 1957 no-mint mark Lincoln 1 cent isn't just about money, it's about meaning. It's a reminder that legacy often hides in the simplest things, and that even the smallest coin can carry the weight of centuries. Collectors who understand this don't just chase profits. They preserve the American story, one coin at a time. So, the next time you see that familiar copper glint, pause. Look closer. Feel the texture, the detail, the history pressed into its face. You might just be holding a fortune, or something even more valuable. A connection to the invisible thread that binds past, present, and future. Because in the world of numismatics, the true treasure isn't only in what you find, it's in what you see. And maybe, just maybe, that 1957 Lincoln 1 cent in your drawer isn't just a cent, it's a secret, waiting to tell its story.